So yesterday I mentioned that we were going to begin Joel today, and I had like high ideals of us showing up in Joel, and then no, Lynn, that does not help. There's Y's in there. Nobody puts Y's in pronunciation brackets. That's real confusing. Yeah, no, I can't do anything with that. I won't even begin to try with that one. Good morning, Mr. Willis. So again, I said we were going to be in Joel. I was wrong. I got to reading through the rest of Hosea, and I stumbled across a passage that I really just I couldn't not talk about the passage. And it's a well known passage. A lot of us know it. Many of us have even quoted it before. And we've said, My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, or we sometimes, for no explicable reason, know it in the King James, My people perish for lack of knowledge. But how many of us actually know what God is saying in the statement? Because it can't be for lack of an IQ. If people were just dying for lack of an IQ, we'd have a lower crime rate. We'd have a few less issues in some regards, and lower population. It'd be an interesting, weird, post-apocalyptic kind of situation for that. So it can't mean that. So let's dive into the passage. Let's read it in context, and let's see what God is actually saying through the prophet Hosea here. In Hosea chapter 4, verses 1 through 6. Hear the word of the Lord, O children of Israel, for the Lord has a controversy with the inhabitants of the land. There is no faithfulness or steadfast love, and no knowledge of God in the land. There is swearing, lying, murder, stealing, and committing adultery. They break all bounds, and bloodshed follows bloodshed. Therefore the land mourns, and all who dwell in it languish. And also the beasts of the field, and the birds of the heavens, and even the fish of the sea are taken away. Yet let no one contend, and let none accuse, for with you is my contention, O priest. You shall stumble by day. The prophet also shall stumble with you by night, and I will destroy your mother. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because you have rejected knowledge, I reject you from being a priest to me. And since you have forgotten the law of your God, I also will forget your children. Good morning, Thelma. Good morning, Michelle. Thanks for hopping in. Just in time for me to. It must be weird to pop in live, like right in the middle of it, and the first thing you hear is me reading from the Bible, I will destroy your mother. That's got to be a weird one. Sorry about that. You may want to rewind. So, dark things are going on in the land of Israel. Remember, Hosea is talking to the northern kingdoms, sometimes referred to in there as Ephraim, but it's the northern 10, not Judah and Benjamin, which are down south and they got their own issues. So those dark things are hurting the people and causing all kinds of calamity in the land. These things are destroying the people. It says the people are languishing. They're like wilting like flowers. And but what is the root cause of those things? Like these are symptoms. This destruction and this languish and the land mourning. These are symptoms. These are problems. But what is the root cause? We know in verse 6 it says it's a lack of knowledge. And as we already established, that can't possibly mean a low IQ. But knowledge of what? Verse 6 continues to say, they have forgotten the law of the Lord. Verse 1 says, there is no knowledge of God in the land. So with that, we see our answer. The people perish for a lack of knowledge of God in His Word. I say God in His Word because the way we know God is through His Word. It's His special revelation of Himself to us. And it's the only way that we know God. Without knowing and understanding the scriptures, we cannot know God. If we rely on experiences and feelings, these weird, floaty, subjective things, then we will be led astray. Like all the false religions and the cults that do the same. We'd be no better off than those trapped in the New Age, just chasing experience after experience and running after like worship night and conference after conference just to get that high and get those feelings. Otherwise, we feel like we are not connected to God at all. What we need and what we must depend on is the infallible and inerrant scriptures. The solid word of God is our firm foundation. If we build our lives on anything else, we will be destroyed, like we see here. People who've forgotten the law of God, forgotten his word, his sacred scriptures. We will be like the guy that Jesus talks about in Matthew 7, who built his house in the sand. Jesus says, those who hear my words and do them are like the one who builds his house on the rock. The wind and the waves, they come against the house, but at the end of the storm, the house is still standing. But those who hear these words and do not do them, those who do not follow the scriptures, they're like the guy who builds his house on sand. And after the storm comes and rattles the house and rages against it, there's no more house. And great was its destruction. It's the same principle we're seeing here. For lack of knowledge of God and his word, for lack of knowing the word of God, and by knowing the word of God, knowing God himself, the people are perishing. People are being consumed and destroyed. And it says that God has rejected Israel as his priest to the nations and left them to their own destruction because they rejected the knowledge of him in his word. Now, we might not think of just not reading it as rejection, but it is. It's there. It's the primary way in which we know God. It's like if you had a long distance relationship with somebody, and the only way that you could talk was like through FaceTime or Skype or whatever it is that you use. But you don't ever open the app. Well, you're not going to know that person. You're not going to have any kind of communication with them, any kind of connection with them. It's essentially, by not opening that app to engage with them, you have rejected that person. So as we see in verse 5, though, when I say they left them to their own destruction, it's not as though God is just taking his hands off. Because in verse 5, he says, I will destroy. So even in his taking his hands off, it's an ordination of God for destruction. God has ordained this destruction to come upon them. And if you're wondering, like, well, how and why can God do that? Go back and read Deuteronomy 28, where God establishes this contract and says, hey, if you guys follow my law and love me above all other gods, love me with your heart, soul, mind, and strength, if you do all that stuff, you guys will be blessed beyond measure. But if you don't, then, well, there's a whole chapter of terrible things that play out and have played out throughout the history of Israel. Well, thanks, Lynn. So the Lord takes such blatant rejection earnestly. But we have a blessed path away from destruction. If we just take seriously the study of the Bible, what we find is the increase of our worship, the increase in our contentedness, and the increase in the fruit of the Spirit, which lead to a peaceable life with our neighbors. So how are you doing in your personal study of the Word? I really hope that you're trying to keep up with our Bible reading plan. We do this, the Bible reading plan we talk about at the end of every service is what we're talking about here and what's kind of guiding our walk through the scriptures on these mornings. And the goal is to finish the Bible together in a year. But if you've got another reading plan, like if you can't keep up with the Bible in a year, which is like 3 or 4 chapters a day, if that's too much for you, or if you need to slow down to really chew on it, then you got to do what's best for you and what's best for your understanding of the Word and your retaining of that Word. As long as it is challenging and equipping you and you're doing what the Word says, keep at it.